By this point, we have our app working pretty well. It's displaying the appropriate information, in this case the name and whether or not the to-do item is urgent or needs to be completed urgently. But there's still a little bit of functionality we need to implement to do with this recycler view. And also we should probably start at least planning out the database schema so that we can work on implementing the functionality in tomorrow's lectures. But first things first, let's first focus on these on-click listeners. So I'd like to attach two in total. One is going to be a short click or just a regular on-click, and the second is going to be a long click. So the short click or regular click listener is just going to navigate us to the add item page, in which we'll be able to edit an existing item. So we'll need to pass in some information, make some minor modifications to that screen. And then when the user long clicks, or essentially presses and holds down, that triggers the long click, then in that case we're just going to delete the item from our list. So we're going to remove it from to-do items list, and if we had the database set up, we would also remove it from the database. So first things first, let's start the short or the regular on-click. We'll navigate to our to-do items adapter, and we're actually going to attach that on-click to our constraint layout. Originally I wanted to attach it to the name text view, and then realized kind of halfway through it's actually more efficient to attach it to the constraint layout as a whole. This way it gives us easier access over all of the elements of this, because we'll need information from both the name and the urgency text views. So if you didn't have a go at this yourself, that's totally okay. I know that it can be pretty tricky. If you tried and successfully implemented it, that is fantastic. You can kind of skip ahead. And if you tried and got stuck, again, not to worry. I know it can be frustrating if you've never done this kind of thing before. So we'll take our constraint layout, and we're going to set our on click listener, not the on long click, but we want just a regular on click listener. Okay, we're going to get a new on click listener, and we're going to implement it in here. Perhaps the first thing we'll want to do is, rather than starting the intent right away, like this, we'll want to get some information so that we can pass it to this intent and then fetch that information in our add item activity. So let's get the information first. We'll need some info from our name and urgency text views. We might as well actually get hold of them first. I just copied and pasted the code because this is exactly the same as the code we'll need. We'll need to then get the name text from our name text view. We'll just call this something like name text. This is just going to be our name text view dot text, and we'll do the same with urgency text. This is just going to be equal to our urgency text view dot text. Okay, so our name text is easy enough. We can actually just pass that as is, but our urgency text is again going to display 2 exclamation marks or nothing. So rather than pass that string, I'd rather pass in a Boolean value that is true or is false, and that way it's a little more representative of whether or not the item is urgent. So I'm just going to say val is item urgent is going to be equal to if our urgency text dot text, oops, that's trim end, dot text, or rather our urgency text is the string itself. If this is equal to these 2 exclamation marks, we want to set is item urgent equal to true, and otherwise we'll set it equal to false. And oh right, did the single equals instead of the double equals. So again, this is just going to provide a way to test to see if that item is urgent, okay? And we know that we are setting that correctly, so that this is a fairly safe way of doing things. Now this is giving me this kind of, I guess, grey squiggly underline, because we can shorten this entirely to just doing something like this. Okay, that's actually perfectly valid because this is going to return true or false anyway, but I'd rather leave it as is because if you've never seen that before, it gets kind of hard to read, a little confusing. So now we have a way to pass pass the item's name and whether or not it's urgent. Now we just need a way to actually feed those values into an intent and pass them to the next screen. Well, what we'll do is we'll get the intent first. We're going to pretty much use this exact couple of lines. So let's just copy and paste these over. We'll need to import the intent, that's fine. And now we run into another couple of issues. So the first issue is that we can no longer just pass this as the context. Our activities have contexts, but these classes do not. So what we'll have to do is actually get the parent context. So parent.context, and that should solve that issue. But we also have this other issue in that we don't have access to start activity. Again, because start activity is a method that belongs to app compact activity and its subclasses. So an easy solution to this would be to pass in main activity to our to-do items adapter so that we can call start activity on main activity. So what we'll do is we'll just create a val activity of type main activity. Okay, and then we can just call upon activity.startActivity, and that should solve the issue here. Of course, that then raises the issue in main activity that we're not passing it in, so it will just pass in this, and again, problem solved. So back to our to-do items adapter. At this point, we are starting the activity, but haven't found a way to feed any values in. Well, if you remember from yesterday's lectures, I said that you can actually put values into our intent, and so that's how we're going to pass values into our add item activity. So specifically, we're going to pass in our name text and our isItemUrgent as string and boolean respectively. So we'll say intent.putExtra. We want to pass in some kind of a string for the name. We can kind of think of this as being like a key, and then the value itself. Let's pass in our name text. Okay, and then we'll do the same for our isItemUrgent, which is going to be a boolean value. We should put in some proper keys here. So let's call this one something like item name. I'm going to put it in caps to signify that it is a key. And in here we're going to say item urgency. Okay, so we now have a way to pass values into our add item activity from this class here. Our next step is going to be to fetch the values that we put into this intent in our add item activity. So what we're going to do is in onCreate, we're just going to fetch some values from our intent. So we'll say something along the lines of val item name is going to be equal to an intent dot get. We want the string extra, so not a string array, we just want the string extra, and we'll pass in the name of the key, which we'll get in just a second. And then we'll want item urgency. And this is just going to be our intent.getStringExtra, or rather getStringExtra, it should be getBooleanExtra. And then again, we want to pass in the proper key. Now our Boolean extra is probably going to want, and it's some kind of a default value, so let's put in the default value of false. And that's because a string can have the default value of null, whereas Booleans actually can't unless they're nullable values. So those keys, if I remember correctly, were item name and item urgency. And here we're going to test to see if item name is equal to null. If item name is null, then we'll do nothing. If item name is not equal to null, then we're basically going to take our item name edit text and we're going to populate it with a value. That value is just going to be the current name of our item. So let's say something along the lines of if our item name is not equal to null, then we're simply going to take our item name edit text and we're going to change that text equal to our item name. And what appears to be the issue here, I think the problem is that it doesn't like us to set the string like this, so we'll just call upon, instead of the text, we'll call upon the set text, and then we can pass in the item name like that. Okay, perfect. So we'll do the same thing with the item urgency. So we'll say if our item urgency is, let's say if it's equal to true, so if the item is urgent, or we could simply say if item urgency, doesn't matter, then we're going to set our isUrgent checkbox and we're going to set it equal to checked. So this is just is checked and we're going to set that again equal to true. So this will just kind of check our checkbox for us. Additionally, because our add item activity right now is saying add a to-do item, I'd like to change that text to edit a to-do item. So I'm just going to create a quick string resource to hold that. Let's just call this, we have an add item message. Just going to paste that and we're going to change this to edit item message. It's just going to say edit a to-do item and we're going to use that string resource. So then we're going to say if this is not equal to null, we'll set this, and we'll also set our text for the text view, which I guess we don't have access to, so let's quickly gain access to that. So it's going to be a private late init variable, and we'll call this the title text view, which is of type text view. Okay, and then we'll just set that text view down here. So title text view equals find view by ID r.id dot, and I think we called it add item title text view. Perfect. So we're just going to take that title text view and we're going to set its text equal to r.string dot, and we want the edit item message. Perfect. Now, so far so good. We can actually pretty much give this a run through. I think we're ready. And let's see what comes up. So if all goes well, when the user clicks on the constraint layout, oh, actually, before we go, there's totally one more thing that I forgot to do, and that's going to be to change our constraint layout to clickable. So what we're going to have to do is go to our custom item, so to do item layout, and we're going to set our constraint layout to clickable equal to true, and we're going to set long clickable because we know we're going to need that eventually anyway, also equal to true. Okay, so let's give those a save. Once the Gradle stops building, we're going to stop this and then just give it a rerun. Okay, that's good. So we'll stop that and we'll give it a rerun here. Okay, so this should just take a second. So now the way this is going to work is it's going to hopefully get our text and our urgency text and then determine whether or not it's urgent. Then it's going to pass in those two values to our intent, and that's going to attach to add item activity. When item activity loads, it's going to check to see if it has these values, okay, and then it's just going to set the text field, the text view, and the is urgent checkbox equal to checked, and the text view equal to that string. So let's just get the emulator, and let's just click on an item. So buy groceries, and that's looking pretty good to me. It says edit a to-do item rather than add a to-do item, and it's filled in our value right there. Okay, so we can click cancel. Let's just return to the home screen. How about do laundry? This is clearly an urgent item. Well, now our checkbox is also checked, so pretty good, guys. So let's just navigate home and let's see if this is working fine. It is indeed, so I think we're good to go. Now at this point we have implemented our on short click listener, or our just regular on click listener, but we still have the on long click listener to do, because what we want is essentially to be able to select an item, so click down on it, and we want it to delete the item, so remove it from our list entirely. So this is going to require a delete in a few different places. It's going to require a delete from our list here in main activity. We're going to have to delete an item here, and then we're going to have to update our recycler view. Now we can update our recycler view. We can actually inform it of the update by calling upon it, or rather getting our recycler adapter, not the view itself. So let's just go recycler adapter. And then we can notify that an item was removed. So notify dataset change, notify an item change at a certain position, notify that an item was removed. So there's a couple of different methods which we can call to notify our recycler adapter that indeed the data that's associated with it has been changed. Likely what we'll have to do is notify the recycler adapter that the data has changed, notify it specifically that something has been removed, and then also notify our recycler view that it should remove a certain view from its list. Alright, and this should all be done in our to-do items adapter. So you know how to implement an on-click listener. Why don't you go ahead and try to implement your long-click listener? So remember, it will start like this: constraint layout dot set on long-click listener, and then we're just going to start a new on long-click listener, and then implement it much the same way as before, but implementing the changes that I explained rather than the more simple changes that we have up here. So try it yourself. I'll provide a solution in a few seconds. Just feel free to pause this, and once you're ready, I'll show you what I've done. Alright, and this is kind of what I've come up with. So it actually ended up being not so complicated in the end. We essentially just have to get the position of the view that's clicked in its parent. So that's what I did with this line here, my parent.index of child. It, by the way, is just the view. As you can see, it says it here. That's just the view of the currently selected view. We're just getting the index of this within its parent so that we know what the index of the selected item is in our overall to-do items list. So from here, we're just getting our to-do items list, and we're removing the specific item at that index. Then we're just notifying our adapter that we have indeed removed this child at this particular position, And then we're setting on click listener equal to true, which essentially means that when the user does a long click, it overrides just a short click here. Okay, if this was set to false, then essentially it doesn't really, when we do a long click, it also does a short click. So we definitely do want to set that to true. Okay, so just a closer look here. As you can see, again, just getting the index of the view that was selected. Then we're removing the item from the list. We're removing the item, or rather that view, from the overall adapter. And then we're returning true. Well, kind of returning true. And it should work here. So let's go ahead and run it and test it out. And we should see that both the short click and the long click are now working. So as long as this is all good, we'll still be able to remove items from our overall list. So let's say we want to buy groceries. That was just a short click, by the way, still working fine, no problems there. But let's say we no longer want groceries on our list. Well, we can hold that down, and that was the long click, and it just made it disappear. Similarly, do laundry, we can remove that. Play guitar, we can remove that also. Okay, so pretty good stuff. Note, however, that I stopped running it and restarted it. The items are actually not permanently deleted from our list. The reason being, we're actually re-adding them every single time this app starts again. So if we open this up, look, all 3 items are back there. So in order to have them permanently added or permanently deleted to and from our app, then we'll need to introduce our database. But that's a task for this section coming right up. So if you have any more clickable items within your recycler view, then you'll definitely want to implement the rest of those on-click listeners for now. Again, this is kind of what it looks like if you want the reference here. Otherwise, we're going to move on to our next section, which is going to be designing the database schema. So we're going to determine what kinds of information we want to store within the database, and we're going to think about how we might retrieve, edit or modify, and then delete items from the overall database. So give that all a thought, as well as not just the way in which we want to store the items, but the type of data we'll be storing in the database. And once you're ready to move on, we'll start building that all up together.